Dear students, this is the second part of our lecture on Lamb and his essay, The Dream Children. Uh, in the first part, which you have must seen till now, in that first part we talked about Lamb as an essayist, and we also talked about uh, an analysis. We also attempted an analysis of the essay Dream Children by Charles Lamb. And as I said in that the first part of this lecture, the first video of this lecture, that I'll be attempting a summary, a critical summary of the text of Dream Children in the second lecture. So here I am, and I'm presenting a summary, a critical summary, a sort of an analysis, or textual analysis of the Dream Children. But before I begin the analysis, the summary part, let us now discuss a bit again about Lamb's essays. You know that Lamb uh, published two collection of his essays. One was titled as Essays of Elia or Elia, and the other was a sequel, The Last Essays of Elia. In these two collections, Lamb explores a broad range of topics, and he works with various non-fictional tropes that often edge into the terrain of fiction. We see Charles Lamb. We see Charles Lamb writing obituaries, writing dream journals. We have read some of his writings where diatribes also you must have also read that. He was writing tributes also. So all these multiple kind of writings, obituaries, dream journals, diatribes, tributes. One thing that unifies Charles Lamb's essays is his lyrical and a very conversational style. So, like many of his fellow romantics, he often uses purple prose. He often shows his sharp wit, but his essays remain accessible. They remain very easy to understand, and they're always a fun to read. So, in spite of the use of purple prose, and in spite of that, the presence of the sharp wit, we find that his essays are always the essays of Charles Lamb are always very accessible, and they are a treat to our reading. They are fun to read. Elia is the persona. We know that Elia is the persona which Lamb uses when he writes his essays. So, in our discussion, it is quite possible that we will be referring sometimes to Lamb, occasionally we will be referring to Lamb, and occasionally we will be referring to Elia. Much of the essay, that is this essay, The Dream Children, can be read as Elia's elegy to his grandmother Field. So this is a very important aspect of this essay, that this essay can also be read as an elegy in which the narrator Elia is talking about, he is actually sort of mourning the death of his grandmother Field. And who is this Field? Do you remember? Field is a very important character in almost all the essays of Charles Lamb. Field is that magnanimous, fearless woman who take care of a mansion in this essay where Elia has spent much of his childhood. He recounts uh, Field, as well as his brother John, to his children in this essay. And when Elia begins to tell his children about their mother Alice, the children fade away. Elia wakes up from his dreams. He realizes that he never had children by Alice because Alice was married to some another man. Students, I will come to the detailed analysis, the detailed summary of this essay later on. But let me, at the very outset here, let me discuss some of the characters which we can find here in this essay, The Dream Children. The characters which Lamb has also used in several other essays. So one is certainly the narrator, Elia. This narrator named Elia has been named by Charles Lamb after a co-worker at South Sea House. Lamb and Elia are effectively the same person when you look at those two collection of Lamb's essays, essays of Elia and the last essays of Elia, and all those essays are narrated through this fictional character Elia. So, and as I said right now that this character Elia has been named after a co-worker which Lamb had at South Sea House. Lamb and Elia, as I said, are effectively the same person. Uh, and this fictional character Elia enabled the writer enabled Lamb to write about his own life, to write about his musings. It gives this the character of Elia gives a voice to the persona of Charles Lamb, and it gives an expression to the literary style of Charles Lamb. So sometimes this character is a very unique character. When you study, when you will get the opportunity of studying some other essay of Charles Lamb, you will notice that this Elia is a very interesting character. Sometimes Elia's attitude and voices are whimsical. Sometimes they are irreverent, and sometimes they are very polemical. Sometimes the voice of Elia, the tone of Elia becomes quite sad. So he is a very interesting character. In short, we can say, regarding the character of Elia, we can say that the persona of Elia evolves from one essay to another. The persona of Elia is not a rigid persona, and Lamb takes creative liberties when writing through the identity of Elia. Sometimes the narration of Elia in some essays is rambling. Sometimes the narration becomes very digressive. The other time it becomes very cogent. It becomes very incisive. The subject matter of Lamb's essays, and including Dream Children, is very sprawling, and the tone is quite varied. Lamb using Elia to write about everything from people he admires to the origin of cooking to his loathing for newspapers. So for all these things, he uses the character of Elia. So apparently, seemingly, the character of Elia gave Lamb a permission to fictionalize his life. It is through this character of Elia that Lamb fictionalizes his life. And this fictionalizing his life makes him feel comfortable to write about himself. So, while we have little reason to believe, many of the facts are fabricated in these essays. But Lamb choosing a pseudonym for himself meant that he could assign pseudonyms to others also that were in his life. The shift in their relationship to himself, ever so slightly, to better fit the purpose of the essay. Uh, Hence, when he talks about his brother John, for example, in A Dream Children, he could have said, he could say that John died. So instead of talking about the real life estrangement that happened between Charles Lamb and John Lamb, so instead of referring to that real life estrangement, he says that John died. So that kind of creative license is taken by Lamb, and this creative license serves a purpose. It enables Lamb to give a fantasy, to add a fantasy to his life. It enables, or rather, it helps him explore the maze of his dream life without getting too bogged down about the grim reality. Another character, and a very important character in the essay, here in this Dream Children and in some other essays also, is the presence of cousin Bridget. Whenever Lamb writes about cousin Bridget, he is alluding to his sister Mary. Do you remember Mary? Mary was a very closest companion of Charles Lamb in his life, in his journey, in his creative as well as personal journey. In your childhood, if you have heard about Lamb's writing of Shakespearean plays uh, in the form of his stories, do you remember the title of the book? It was titled as Lamb's Tales from Shakespeare, and the author are Charles and Mary Lamb. So this Mary, the original sister, the actual sister of Charles Lamb, is the closest companion that Lamb had. And here one will be reminded of Wordsworth and his closest companion, his sister Dorothy Wordsworth. So in the character of cousin Bridget, in the fictional character of cousin Bridget, he is alluding his sister Mary. She does not, although she does not figure prominently in his essays, but he occasionally brings this character and attributes one story on another through the character of cousin Bridget. Another important character which you will find in Dream Children and in some of the other essays of Charles Lamb is the character of John L. He has been mentioned in the Dream Children as his older brother, his elder brother. John L. is portrayed as a heroic elder brother who gave young Elia the support which Elia was unable to reciprocate. So Elia mourns his death, and he also bemoans his own shortcomings with regard to his relationship with his brother. Now, in real life, Lamb, Charles Lamb had a brother, as you know, named John Lamb. And when this essay was written, and by that time when this essay was written, John Lamb was not dead. He has been mentioned dead, he has been declared dead here in this essay. But by the time the essay was written, in the real life, the brother John Lamb was not dead. Rather, they had an estranged relationship at that time because of family disputes. But here in this essay, John L. has been declared as dead. Another character which Lamb takes up in this essay, Dream Children, and he also takes up this character in some of his other essays also, is the character of Alice. Alice is Elias or Elia's unrequited love. She is the unrequited love interest of Charles Lamb. And she has been mentioned, she has been referred here in this essay, The Dream Children, and in some other essays of Charles Lamb also. So she appears to be here in this essay, Dream Children. She appears as the fantasy mother of Elia's fantasy children. She also appears in another Charles Lamb essay, A Chapter on Years. So this character, Alice, is based on a real character named Anne Simmons. And this character figures in some of the sonnets also written by Charles Lamb. Remember that I said you in the previous video, I told you in the previous video that Lamb started writing uh, poems in the early part of his literary career. So in some of his sonnets, this character of Anne Simmons as Alice is also mentioned in some of the sonnets also. But the most interesting character here in this essay, and in some other prominent essay of Charles Lamb, is the character of Field. Elia's grandmother in this essay, Dream Children. Field is described as a major influence on the young writer, and she is one of his favorite childhood influence, one of his favorite childhood figure. She embodies good qualities, and she embodies such good qualities which the narrator clearly believes that he lacks, such as the good faith in God, such as magnanimity, such as magnanimity, such as casual fearlessness. So these are the things, these are the characters which Lamb mentions in the persona of Field, and which was missing in the character of Charles Lamb. So though the characterization of Field, through the characterization of Field, we learn uh, the strength of the character of the writer's grandmother, and we also learn the shortcomings of the narrator. Now let us come to the summary. The essay opens with Elia or Lamb narrating the story of his grandmother, Mrs. Field, to his children. Lamb's grandmother and the great grandmother of his children lived in a great house at Norfolk. This house was 100 times bigger than the house they are living presently. So this is what Elias says, that the house which my grandmother Phil used to live and we used to live during our childhood was 100 times bigger than this house in which we are living at present. Friends, you will realize that we as children, or any child so to say, children love to listen to the stories of our elders, and we attempt to imagine our elders through these stories, those elders whom we are unable to see, whom we now cannot see. So by listening to those stories of our grandparents, of our grandfather, grandmother, great grandfather and great grandmother, so by listening to the stories of the elders, we can imagine those elders whom we are now unable to see. So Elia is narrating the story. His children has gathered around him, and he is narrating the story of their great grandmother Field to them, who lived in a mansion, which she was taking care of. The mansion was not owned by the family, the Lamb family. She was basically a caretaker of that mansion, which was given to her by a rich family who was living in a different mansion at some different place. So Lamb narrates to his children the story of a tragic scene that had been carved out in the wood upon the chimney piece of the great hall in the great house of their great grandmother. This wood chimney was later on replaced by a marble chimney by the owners. Mrs. Field, Lamb's grandmother or Elia's grandmother, was not the real owner of this house, as I mentioned earlier, but due to her behavior, due to her kind, humble behavior, due to her religiosity, due to her piousness and piety, the owners, the actual owners, were very much impressed her, by her religious devotion. So everybody of the owners, they respect her. So the owner of the house hired the grandmother, Lamb's grandmother, Elia's grandmother, as the caretaker of this mansion. And they, the owners, lived in some other mansion. Mrs. Field was living in this great house with the aura of as if the house was her own. Later on, some precious ornaments and some precious decorative pieces of this mansion were shifted by the real owners to their house. However, Lamb says that those decorative, precious ornaments and pieces did not suited did not suit the modern house where they were shifted. Uh, at this juncture in the essay, young Alice scoffs at Elia's recollection of the rich person. She scoffs at this detail of removing the wood carving depicting the story of the children in the wood. So Lamb comes back to the description of the grandmother once again. Lamb tells the children about the death of the grandmother, about her funeral that was attended by a large number of people, both poor and rich alike. They attended the funeral of uh, great grandmother Field. People from many miles traveled to come and to express their condolences and to express their respect to the departed soul. So Lamb recounts that at the funeral of his grandmother Field, everyone praised her for her goodness, for her religious faith. Everybody was talking about that how she could recite psalms, and even she was capable of reciting some of the New Testament things out of her memory. So Lamb starts telling her children now about her youth, that she was a tall, upright woman with a very graceful personality. She was the best dancer in the country, in the area, until attacked by cancer, and this deprived her of her dancing skills. However, this disease of cancer could not take her grace, could not take her good spirits. Furthermore, Lamb tells his children, Alice and John, of how his grandmother used to sleep alone in that isolated chamber of that mansion. She believed that the house is visited by the ghost of two infant children. During midnight, the ghost of two infant move around the house. However, she was not sure that they were decent mortals. She was sure, sorry. She was sure that these ghosts were not harmful. They were decent mortals and they would not hurt her. Uh, Lamb says that I used to sleep with the maid, but I felt quite frightened at the very thought of the ghosts of those infants because I was not as religious as my grandmother. Then, moving ahead in the essay, Lamb says that the young Elia used to wander around the grounds of the mansion, admiring all those marble busts that were installed in the ground of the mansion. And even he was occasionally wondering that when he may turn himself into one of the bust, one of the marble bust. So he has spent his days picking various fruits around the ground of that estate, that mansion. So at this point, there is a break. Elia breaks from this recollection and he notices that his children, John and Alice, are splitting a plate of grapes. And then he moves again to his recollection. He continues telling about his grandmother Field to his children. That Field used to love all her grandchildren, but he especially loved Elia's elder brother John L., who was a handsome, great spirited young man who used to ride horses in his young age. And Elia says that my brother John used to carry me on the back of the horses. And he says that when I became lame footed in my young age, so my elder brother John used to carry me on his own back when I became lame footed. And then he recollects that when John fell ill, he was unable to care for his brother in the same manner as John cared for him. He was unable to care for his brother. And he says that when John died, I reserved my emotion, but I was consumed with a great sorrow. I did not express too much. I reserved my emotion, but I was consumed with great sorrow. Moving ahead in the essay, he reminisced John's gentleness and his pettiness, and he desires that had these things become alive once again. He wanted his brother John to alive once again so that he could fight with him again. Lamb felt very uneasy without his brother. He felt very poor without his brother. Elia now begins telling his children about those 7 years that he has spent courting their mother Alice. Students, we are coming to the last part of the essay. So he starts Elia starts telling about those 7 years which he has spent courting the mother of the children, John and uh, Hannah. So he was talking about that how he was courting his children. So he was courting his love, Alice. Uh, and he talks about all those difficulties he faced in this courtship. He talks about all those rejection that he faced in that courtship. At this juncture, dear students, at this juncture, suddenly Elia looks towards his daughter Alice, and he realizes that she has disappeared. A disembodied voice tells Elia that they are not Alice's children. A disembodied voice at this juncture of the essay tells Elia that he is not the real father of Alice's children. The real father of Alice's children is actually a man named Bertram, and they are just dreams. Children in this essay, they are just dreams. So, with this, Elia wakes up in his armchair, finding his Bridget, his cousin Bridget, by his side, and the memory of the great grandmother, the memory of John L., the memory of Alice is gone forever. So finally, here at this part of the essay, towards this last and final part of the essay, two desolate structures are left out of them, saying him that they are neither of Alice's children nor of you. They are not children at all. They are merely dreams. And suddenly, Lamb wakes up and he finds himself in the bachelor's armchair where he has fallen asleep with that loyal, faithful Bridget by his side. So at this place, at this juncture, the essay ends. Now, I would like to insist, dear students, that go to the text, read the actual text, and then listen to this analysis. And I hope that before going to this analysis, you will surely see the first part of this lecture. But I also insist that after going through this analysis, you should once again go to that first part, specifically the critical analysis part that I have done in that first video. Thank you very much.